Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. Now, I've had several people talk to me about my videos not showing up and being unsubscribed. So maybe just check, if you're watching this, that you are subscribed, if you want to be, and that you are on notifications. Apparently turning it off and on again resets the internet, which, I mean, what bad things can happen with that? But anyway, on to the story. Written by In Yellow Clad. Bad Rapra, a name that would go down in history, is a planet smack dab on the edge of human space. A planet that sat at the junction of several supply lanes and commerce hubs, and was for all intents and purposes a fortress world as a result. Considering it was only way through the region of space that was known for lost ships that ventured out into the twin nebulas, from which nothing but space wildlife ever returned. It was, as you might think, a damn important planet to hold on to. A planet from which a counterattack could be launched in any direction. A choke point that could be breached without exorbitant cost to resources and manpower. A planet from which a foe could strike at the heart of humanity, should they take it. Which was why humanity and the Ta'aks were currently brawling over it. The reasons for the current interstellar conflict aren't important. What is important is the planet, over and on which the two belligerents have fought each other to a standstill. Upon this planet is a fortress garrisoned by some of the most seasoned men and women of the Terran military. And trenches span the entire planet, surrounding cities and industry as protection against invasion. In orbit, it is much the same. Sort of. Instead of trenches, there are reefs of defense satellites and weapons emplacements. Shoals of warships patrol the space around the planet, and the lanes that all are forced to use. It was built to be impenetrable, imposing in a way that any foe would cower at the mere mention of it. And yet, the Ta'aks had launched a bold assault upon the planet, bringing 4 of their largest fleets to bear down upon the defenses. It was a brutal fight. Losses were heavy on both sides, but neither was willing to back down. It was the same on the ground. The Ta'aks had made a planetfall with relative ease, only to find themselves staring at trench lines that were miles thick and brimming with all manner of terrible weaponry. Since humanity was unwilling to give up their defensive positions and simply let the enemy break themselves against said defenses, things quickly devolved into a game of waiting and patience. The Ta'aks had boldly walked right into the fire, thinking they could easily beat such defenses. They were quite wrong about that. In less than 4 hours, they'd lost several thousand troops to coordinated artillery, air and ground fire, while humanity lost not even a percentage of that. So the Ta'aks decided to emulate humanity instead, building their own counter-trenches and emplacements. And now, the course of any engagement was predicted on who was winning in space. Regular supply drops and the rotating of troops off the front lines became exceedingly difficult at times thanks to the back-and-forth nature of the space-borne conflict. So, as is wont to happen in such cases, the soldiers grew bored and, in some cases, desperate. For example, one day the battle would end. Nobody knew it at the time, but one small event would change the course of the battle in favor of humanity, as the Ta'aks would get a taste of what humanity was truly like, and it would be a thing that shook them to their core. A fine morning indeed, or so it appeared. The silence over the trenches was an illusion that could be shattered at any moment by artillery or gunfire, yet none came, and so the Ta'aks commander watched the birds in the sky instead, sipping on a hot drink that was his species' equivalent of human coffee. It served to give him that extra little jolt that would keep him awake. Something he needed these days. The most that ever happened were one side hurling insults at the other, and the occasional pot shot just to remind the enemy that they still existed. I, Lord Commander Issel, turned my attention to the device we were building. It was a twofold thing. The first part of it would project a movable shield, which could theoretically withstand an orbital strike, and would allow our troops to advance on enemy trenches without fear of death. The other was a directed energy weapon, one capable of leveling entire city blocks if they so wished, or even striking at an orbiting capital ship with reasonably grand results. It would be a good weapon to use when we began to advance, as it could soften targets with ease in a way that artillery wasn't quite capable of. At the moment, only the cannon was built, and even that wasn't fully ready for deployment. There were several simulations still needing to be run, but I was confident that soon we could begin a proper assault. Once the shield platform was complete, that said, I had a feeling of unease settle over me as the heavy fog rolled in and partially obscured the sky. A few orders later, then I was certain that any potential attack could be thwarted during such a phenomenon. What I wasn't expecting was to see the shape walk out of the midst that was distinctly not a Te-X. See, we Te-X are very tall species. We sport 6 limbs, 4 arms and 2 legs. The second pair of arms are smaller and widely considered to be vestigial at this point in our evolution. Our bodies are covered in a light coating of fur, vaguely avian heads, and a long stinger-tipped tail, like some sort of really fact-up hybrid of a bird, scorpion, and dog, as the humans would say. That generally didn't offend us. We understood that some species were really only able to compare us to somewhat similar creatures on their homeworlds. That was all right. What walked out of the midst was not a Te-X, but human, smaller than us by at least 4 human feet, lacking the extra limbs and fur, plus no tail, which was just wrong on so many levels. I expected a human in power armor, which we had discovered to be exceedingly devastating against us, with no real counter, beyond sticking a death pack somewhere where they couldn't reach and blowing them up. Instead, this human walked casually through our trench in what they call shorts and a t-shirt, their hair messy and the beginnings of something called a beard showing along their jaw. Even their boots were untied, loose, and flopping around their hideous feet as they walked. So stunned we all were that nobody moved as the human walked wearily up to the cannon controls, which I know really shouldn't be out in the open like they were, but the design of the cannon resulted in the controls being outside rather than protected internally, and just stared at them for what felt like hours. I was about to bellow a war cry and charge the human when they finally moved. It felt as though my perception of time slowed as I watched their 5-fingered hand curl only 4 digits. That way, what they called an index finger, rigid and extended as it rose into the air, and then began to descend towards the control panel. Nobody moved, nobody even dared breathe, as the finger pushed a button. Nothing happened, and the humans seemed to be confused by this, as they pushed the button several more times before they tried simply holding it down. When even that didn't work, they let out a little huff of annoyance and started pushing other buttons, till one actually did something. He paused when the capacitors began drawing power audibly, quickly too, and finally the first button had been pressing lit up as the charging sequence finished. With a soft shrug and a frown of sorts, they pushed the button one more time, before the sky was split in 2 and darkened considerably as a violet beam of energy lanced forth from the cannon. It lasted for 30 seconds before suddenly shutting down, the cannon barrel smoking, and the human looked surprised before they shrugged and uttered a sentence that would haunt me forever. "Huh, so that's what it does. Huh, neat." And they turned around and walked casually back through the trenches. When they reached the perimeter, they climbed up and out, sauntering lazily across the open fields between our lines. A flurry of panicked comms chatter reached me finally, as I listened with a mounting sense of horror and even embarrassment. I learned that this random human who had fired our weapon quite by chance had also heaped more misfortune upon us. Our flagship was in flames. Against all odds, the stars had seemingly aligned for this one human to make an unguided and unintentional attack against the pride of our fleet, using our very own weapon against us. All because he'd let his own curiosity get the better of his judgment, and because I, in my shock, had simply allowed it to happen. I sat down heavily and wondered what to do. 2 hours later, word had spread far and wide, and we no longer wished to fight these apes. For what new misfortunes could they heap upon us in their pursuit of their cure to boredom? An hour after that, the war was over. When Corporal Flynn made it back to his particular stretch of shitty trench, he found the company CO standing there waiting for him, and he did not look impressed. "Just what the hell do you think you're doing, Corporal?" Captain McGowan practically spat, and the corporal stared blankly at him for approximately 2 seconds before responding, realization crossing his face before he grinned broadly. "I was bored, sir." End of story. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Bushmaster 177, Henry the Red, Caspar Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon WRE, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.